Okay.
Can everyone see the slides?
Yeah, slides are very clear and neat.
Okay, awesome.
So I think while we are waiting for others to sort out, let me just basically have a sort of a brief introduction to what the session is about, as well as what are the sort of format that we are going for. One of the things that you'll notice as well since the very beginning of the session is that these sessions are very casual in a way. So it's a discussion. It's basically a very informal meeting with of course Prof. Lee as well as with the audience as well. And we're gonna start soon and hopefully try to get everything done by 4 p.m. So just a couple of introductions regarding this particular series. The We Champion series is the initiative conducted by the Mission 4.7 Secretariat team. Basically, this particular session is where we put together a series of meetings with champions around the world that really push the agenda of education for sustainable for development. And obviously, Prof. Lee is one of the important speakers that we have today, since that her career and her life work is always revolved around education, and of course, education for sustainable development as well. So we have been doing this for the last 5 sessions now, I think, and the last one is a couple of weeks ago. Just for the benefit of the audience, the Mission 4.7 is basically a secretariat that works to promote the 4.7 goals. That is to ensure all the learners around the world acquire knowledge and skills that is required or needed to promote sustainable development by 2030. And obviously, with that in mind, Prof. Lee is a perfect person to engage with, and we would like to pick her brain as well as looking through all the initiative that Sunway Education Group has done, forth examples of others around the world, as well as to inspire the initiatives from various groups around the world as well. I'm not going to speak too long because this session is not really about me, but let me at least provide a brief introduction about Prof. Lee. Prof. Elizabeth Lee is a Chief Executive Officer at Sunway Education Group, SEG, and she's been in the leadership since 1992. That the SEGs now has developed into over 20 institutions, including Sunway University, Sunway College, and Sunway International School. And obviously, Sunway itself as a brand is always known for championing SDGs. And these kind of values and visions are being materialized throughout the institutions that exist within Sunway Education Group as well as Sunway Group as a whole. And that's why we are very lucky today to have Prof. Lee to be here with us to share some of the initiative, the programs, the vision really in terms of pushing ESD agenda forward. So without further, we're going to have a short presentation with by Prof. Lee for a good 20 minutes or so. Then we're going to have a discussion. Then we're going to collect questions from the floor as well. So in the chat box, you can introduce yourself. There's going to be a function button for Q&As as well in the Zoom meeting. And feel free to ask questions, and if you have any opinions, or you have any things that you wanted to say, put it forward. I'll make sure to read them and have a discussions afterwards. So Prof. Lee, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Imran. Can everyone hear me? I think so. Okay. So thank you, participants and guests. Thank you for having me as your speaker for today's truly special event. I would like to begin with a short presentation, and thereafter, of course, I will be happy to take any questions that you may have. So let me start with the challenges that we face. And before I go on to talk about the Sunway Education Group's efforts in actualizing the UN Sustainable Development Goals in education for Sustainable Development Principles, please allow me to begin by outlining the challenges that we face both locally and globally when it comes to sustainability. So according to the latest and third part of the 6th IPCC Assessment Report, Climate Change 2022, it's now or never, like Elvis Presley sang, if our world is to stave off climate disaster. Jokes aside, John Kerry, the US Presidential Envoy for Climate called the report a defining moment for our planet and warned that governments must move faster. To quote him from The Guardian on the 4th of May 2022, he said, "The report tells us that we are currently falling short in our battle to avoid the worst consequences of climate change and to mobilize the urgent global action needed. But importantly, the report also tells us that we have the tools we need to reach our goals, and that is to cut greenhouse gas emissions in half by 2030, reach net zero by 2050, and of course, secure a healthier and cleaner planet." As we all know, one of the biggest challenges is climate change. We are all experiencing the nightmare already as of now. Floods, fires, and extreme heat in various parts of the world serve as reminders to all of us of the rapidly worsening problem. We do not have to look beyond our own country. We experienced floods at the end of last year, and those which occurred this year, the most recent being in Baling, Kedah. I still remember being on site to visit affected colleagues and students we could not reach because of the high waters late last year in Taman Sri Muda, Selangor. It was quite a nightmare. And we have also experienced the extreme heat or humidity interspersed with thunderstorms. And then that's the for all of us to reflect and realize that we need to change our way of life and our relationship with planet Earth. The lockdowns worldwide at the beginning of the pandemic brought some reprieve for Mother Nature, but it was only for a short while. And you will remember these pictures that I'm showing here, because it was obviously a reminder to all of us that if we stopped our unsustainable ways, this beautiful Mother Earth of ours can be returned to us. So the chain of catastrophes wrought by climate change in turn affect the economy, and with that, of course, jobs and livelihoods. And we are now facing rising inflation and food security issues. In a post-pandemic world, we are seeing a rise in inflation and food shortage, all of which exacerbated by the war in Ukraine, of course, which is causing food and energy prices to skyrocket. According to the United Nations Food and Agriculture Organization, or the FAO, food security is a fundamental principle of human rights. The UN has highlighted that the world is not on track to achieve zero hunger, which is the UN SDG goal number 2 by 2030. This is all just a tip of the iceberg, and there's no pun intended. There are just so many issues, and we do not have the time to cover all. So, what can we do? You and me assess the need for everyone to work together in order to have or even reverse some of the devastation of climate change. Changes have to be made in societies and economies, no doubt a long shot, but if we do not act, we only hasten the death of our planet and that of the human race. This should serve as a wake-up call. We need to build a better, cleaner world, one that is more balanced, and a world where we live in harmony with nature. And of course, we need our next generations to be responsible. Hence, the importance of the United Nations SDGs. We need science change makers who will promote sustainability no matter what their job scope or industry they are in. And on top of that, we also need to have graduates who not only seek employment, but who can help create jobs as well. If you were to look closely at the 17 UN SDGs, you will note that they are all interrelated. And if that's too much at one go, then I would suggest that you adopt 1, 2, or 3 of your favorite ones to champion before adding more and eventually embracing all 17 of them. And this brings us quite nicely to the next part of the presentation. What is Sunway, and more pertinently, the Sunway Education Group, doing to tackle the challenges by playing our part? Our role is to educate and inculcate in our community sustainable practices. But first, we must bring to all consciences that our planet is indeed dying, and we are the ones killing it. We must stop in our unsustainable practices now if we are to have any kind of future to look forward to for ourselves, our children, and their offspring to come. Tan Sri Jeffrey Chia, our founder at Sunway and chairman, has time and again said that our efforts at Sunway are driven by our recognition that realizing the SDGs is not the sole responsibility of governments. It requires the commitment of all sectors of society, the private sector, academia, civil society, and of course, every single individual. We are all in this together. To achieve the SDGs and the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development, all the peoples of the earth will have to be of one mind and one heart. And here at Sunway, we are paving the way forward for this shared mission of peace and prosperity for people and the planet now and into the future by starting with our students and our staff through the SDGs in education. Our philosophy is to learn first and in turn teach others and hope that this continues. We hope to not just drop a single pebble into the water, but many pebbles so that we can reach out to as many as we can get on board. And our main areas of concentration are goal number 4, quality education, goal number 5, gender equality, goal number 8, decent work and economic growth, goal number 10, reduced inequalities, and goal number 11, which is sustainable cities and communities. Remember, I said to start with 1, 2, or 3, and then adopt more, and hopefully in time to come, embrace all 17. So dear participants and guests, our goal at the Sunway Education Group is to nurture a new generation of change makers, sustainability champions who will heal our planet and ensure us of a better world for our future generations. I will next share some initiatives taking place that we hope are enabling us to realign our education system. First, we have the Jeffrey Sachs Center on Sustainable Development. The Jeffrey Sachs Center on Sustainable Development at Sunway University was established through the partnership of the Jeffrey Chia Foundation and the United Nations Sustainable Development Solutions Network Association, or the SDSN, and of course, Professor Jeffrey Sachs, a world-renowned economist, advocate, and director of the SDSN. The center is a regional hub for research and policy practice, creating world-class programs to train a new generation of students, practitioners, and policymakers, and develop linkages with major Malaysian and international universities in joint problem solving around the Sustainable Development Goals. And one of its flagship programs is our Masters in Sustainable Development Management program. The program was created to equip passionate ambitious people from multidisciplinary backgrounds to become pioneers who are adept on management and problem solving using analytics and systems thinking, guided by, of course, global concerns. We want to bring together policymakers, civil society, industry, so that they may work together to develop innovative solutions to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals in an actionable way in their specific sectors or areas of work. Remember that SDG 17 is key on smart partnerships. Secondly, we have the SDG Academy, champion of We Champion Speaker Series among all the other amazing things that they are doing, which is part of the UN Sustainable Development Solutions Network, or the UN SDSN, and Sunway University is proud to host the SDSN KL office. SDSN and the academy within it is better positioned to help engage with sustainable development research, projects, and practices in the Eastern Hemisphere, and both the challenges particular to this region, as well as the expertise coming out of the region. And with the SDG Academy having a team within Sunway, we're able to use the university as our living lab to explore effective SDG education, such as our MPU and the SEG training module that we are planning, which is similar to SDG training for all our pre-university students. And among the goals of the SDG Academy are to increase our reach in Asia and the Pacific by creating content from and about the region, oversee the Global Online Masters Program initiative, working closely with Sunway University in particular, advise on education initiatives among regional SDSN networks, and last but not least, serve as a hub for SDSN's work in the Mission 4.7 Secretariat. And what is Mission 4.7? It brings together leaders from across the world to develop and lead the implementation of education for sustainable. Some time to visit the SDG Academy, and you can see in the slide their website, which is sdgacademy.org. And of course, this brings us to Mission 4.7 itself. Mission 4.7 goals are important because there are leaders from government, academia, civil society, and business who are brought together to accelerate the implementation of education for sustainable development worldwide, and to highlight the critical importance of education in achieving the Sustainable Development Goals. The SDG Academy team's progress with Mission 4.7 in Malaysia currently includes: 1, fine-tuning of the project methodology, comparing the curriculum between Ontario Global Schools Program and, of course, the Malaysian curriculum. And in phase 2, which is by December 2022, they will develop an SDG localization toolkit and prototype and pilot a curriculum handbook for Malaysia. Then there's also phase 3, which will start in Q4 of 2022, where they plan to advocate with the Malaysian Ministry of Education and all stakeholders to incorporate ESD and GCE into our Malaysian national curriculum. So, dear participants and guests, I'm also very excited to share that Sunway recently established the Sunway Center for Planetary Health under the leadership of Tan Sri Jamila Mahmud, the Executive Director of the Center. Planetary health is an integrated approach to improving our relationship with planet Earth. The Center believes that in order to advance humanity's well-being, the declining state of planet Earth can no longer be ignored. the center contributes to the advancement of planetary health through education, research, making knowledge accessible, and engaging with people across the Asia and Pacific regions. The center's priority is also to prevent the next pandemic. And they are taking much believed necessary to address the various spread, such as biodiversity loss, food production and consumption, population mobility, and of course, climate change. Recently also, there was the SCPH, or the Sunway Center for Planetary Health, pledge, the first pledge ever, to consciously dedicate one's life to the service of humanity and to the protection of natural systems on which human health depends, and to commit to enabling the diversity of life on the planet to thrive now and into the future. Other than centers, we have numerous and non-stop initiatives in place on campus. They include, just to name a few, no plastic bags, styrofoam, kill the styrofoam, single use of plastic. And we also encourage staff and students to bring their own water bottles, food containers, and utensils to reduce the usage of single-use plastic. And besides formal and informal teaching and learning, there are also our research endeavors. Our academics encourage and incorporate the UN SDGs into assignments, activities, events, and volunteer work, as well as part of their research. This helps to further create awareness and understanding on the importance and the connection of the UN SDGs. You can see our researchers in action in this slide. And I'm very pleased to share that this year, we are taking things one step further by making the SDG in education compulsory for all on campus and within the Sunway community. And this is supported by the Malaysian Ministry of Higher Education. The SDGs, Sustainable Development Goals, modules are included in our teaching and learning content. And all students of SEG have to complete this, which is compulsory Ministry of Higher Education MPU subjects offered under the General Studies Department. Dear participants and guests, my last part 3 of this presentation is about taking action. Before concluding this sharing bit, I would like to highlight that the Education for Sustainable Development, ESD 2030 roadmap by UNESCO. And there are 5 priority areas, I must add, for action. Firstly, it must be recognized that policymakers are responsible in bringing about global transformation. As such, they are instrumental in creating an empowering environment for ESD in education institutions, communities, and where learning takes place. Advancing policies which support ESD should not be limited to the education sector, but all sectors involved in sustainable development. And that's what we hope to do with our Jeffrey Sachs Center and the Sunway Center for Planetary Health, as well as our research endeavors. Secondly, there's an urgent need to transform learning environments. Learning institutions need to be transformed first before learners can be encouraged to be change makers for sustainable development. Whole learning institutions must be aligned with sustainable development principles, from its learning content and pedagogies to the way facilities are managed and how decisions are made. And that's why we have our SDG Education Initiative, as well as campaigns like The Last Straw. Thirdly, let's build capacities of educators. Nothing like teacher champions, teacher warriors. All educators have the ability to help students understand the complex choices which sustainable development requires and motivate them to transform themselves as well as that of society. To be able to guide and empower their students, educators themselves first need to be empowered and equipped with the right knowledge, skills, values, and of course, behaviors. Fourthly, we should go all out to empower and mobilize our youth. It is important to empower and mobilize young people, for it is they who are becoming increasingly vocal and active, demanding urgent and decisive change and holding world leaders accountable, especially in addressing climate crisis. They have and continue to envision the most creative and ingenious solutions to sustainable challenges. As such, they are central to the implementation of the ESD. And fifthly, we need to accelerate local level actions. The community is where meaningful transformation and transformative actions for sustainable development are most likely to take place. With this in mind, there is an urgent need for learning institutions and the community to work together in tandem to ensure that knowledge and practices for sustainable development are shared and utilized. One example is a collaboration between Sunway Group with our local council, the Subang Jaya City Council, or the MBSJ, in developing a green and sustainable city through the efficient use of resources. And among the elements included in the MBSJ Bandar Sunway project were the development of public facilities with low carbon aspects, green transportation infrastructure such as free bus services, dedicated bicycle lanes and covered pedestrian walkways, and recycling lake water into drinking water according to the standards set by the Health Ministry. On that note, ladies and gentlemen, I would like to conclude with a quote by former UN Secretary General Ban Ki-moon, who said, "Be a global citizen, act with passion and compassion. Help us make this world safer and more sustainable today for the generations that will follow us. That is our moral responsibility." So thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for listening to me, and I'm happy to take questions after this.
Thank you very much, Prof. Lee, for this amazing and inspiring presentation.
Thank you.
And I've been here with Sunway for the last 1 year now, and even then I feel like I've learned a lot from the presentations. And one of the key things that I think I like from your presentations, obviously there are many inputs and many ideas and pointers. But of course, I think you started off with this global vision, which I think it's somewhat important, because only by recognizing the global problems that we have, and we can think about the solutions globally as well. And from that, you talk about developing a proper ecosystem that cut across not just education sectors, but integrated with the city developments and with other things that Sunway is doing as well. And I think that's important as well. With the global visions, everything is interconnected in many ways. And the last point I think that strikes me as something that is very crucial is the importance to develop a action-oriented program that engage the local as well as the society. I mean, things that we are doing at this education sectors and the ivory tower, it shouldn't be confined to this particular space, but it has to kind of like overflow to the society in general. So, and on that note, I guess I wanted to give a shout out to all the attendees for having a very global presence. We have everybody from Philippines, from India, from Cambodia, from Nigeria. Thank you very much for being here. And this is something that I think I'm always excited to see, because it goes to show that the global connections that we have when we are dealing with this issue of education. So if you have any questions, feel free to drop the questions on the questions and answers box. But before that, I wanted to ask questions myself to Prof. Lee. When I learned about you, and of course, I mean, your work, it's for the last 20, 30 years already, you have always been working with education, and you have been passionate about education. So my question is, I guess, is this: what drive you to champion education as part of your lifelong goals, if you like, and obviously as well, then later you kind of link it together with the whole SDG and Sustainable Development Agenda as well. So maybe a personal stories from you, we hope, because I'm sure that there's a lot of inspiring stories and moments from you on how you came into this education sectors and working for it.
Well, you know, all this talk about sustainability, if there's one group or one species that's not so sustainable, it's probably ourselves. And what I mean is, I don't mean the human race. I actually mean that you, me, individually, we can't live forever. And as such, we need to invest in the next generation. And what better way to do so than through education, that you build your legacy, as I call it, through the next generation, and they themselves then perpetuate to the next ones. And so the same with sustainability now, with, like I said, planet Earth in dire straits. And actually, when you're faced with a prospect that there may be no future, because, you know, at the rate that we're going, we're just killing it. And so it becomes very desperate, and hence this drive to need to send that message and to perpetuate it out, and to get as many people on board, and to understand that we have to stop, like I said, in our unsustainable ways, so that there could be a future left.
And one thing that I like about as well is, I mean, obviously, I think, the younger generations, we are living in this challenging world, and more often than not, I feel like I consider myself, I guess, slightly older than the younger generation now. But from what I've heard, at least talking to younger generation, the students especially, there's always that sense of pessimism. And I think the whole point of having SDG is that it departs from a very optimistic, positive notes. I mean, we are going to change the world, and the problems are real, but it doesn't mean that there's no chance for us to change it and make the world, make the future a better place. And obviously, I mean, what do you think about this very bleak sort of discussions about the future? Maybe we should really, and how do we kind of like overcome it and try to take it as a positive way to move forward with our generation, as well as moving towards a better future?
I go back to the pandemic. I mean, the pandemic is really a bleak reminder, you know, it's so strange. This pandemic has brought the whole world to a standstill at one point, you know, lockdowns everywhere. And when that happened, and all of us returned home and stopped driving around and stopped flying around, you know, and suddenly, for that brief moment, it was clean.
It is actually, yeah.
You know, and Mother Earth could come back to life. I mean, it's so amazing that it brought this pandemic brought that to our consciousness, you know, and look at it. I already showed you the way. You really have to stop in your unsustainable ways. You have to find some way to cut your carbon emissions. You have to find some way to get rid of all these other things that are that's killing the planet.
Yeah,
and also, you know, the SDGs don't only cover, it's also covering humanity itself. Do we need a war? Look at what the war is doing to all of us. It's causing a food crisis on top of things. So, okay, it's kind of bleak, but the bleakness is actually a reminder, because when we stop to count our blessings, the blessings are so much more. And so we should move ahead with optimism, because the tools, as it's been shown, they are all in our hands, and we can make that difference. And I always apologize to the younger generation that we have brought this upon them with our own unsustainable actions over the years that we've been on this earth. But the thing is, I'm willing to change and I'm willing to make a difference, but it is their world. And so they really need to maybe forego convenience, for example, to be more sustainable, get rid of that single-use plastic, wash your straws more. You don't need to throw away plastic straws, that kind of thing, yeah, foregoing a bit of convenience, and so that we can, and if everyone does that little bit, it can really make a big difference. I mean, just one lockdown, how long was it?
Yeah.
And look at the difference just for that moment, just for not very long.
Very true, very true.
Hmm.
We have a few questions as well from the audience, and I think these are quite interesting questions as well. And I'll read some of them. These are the questions from Mr. David Chong. There are 3 questions. One is that as we need, this sense of urgency, we need actions now. What do you think, what do you feel, Prof. Lee, are the 3 most important actions/SDG goals that we need to address and can achieve over the next 3 years? That's the first question, I think. And the second question is, I think I'll just stop at question number 2. How do you balance your personal life, professional work, and career? What are the 3 most important issues that lies behind your success? I mean, these are something that they wanted to pick your brain about your journey as a leaders that led this this group into this amazing place that they are now. So those 2 questions, let's start with the first 2 questions. So one is the 3 most important actions or SDG goals that we can achieve for the next 3 years. And then of course, the 3 important issues that lies behind your success to kind of lead the SDG group to where it is now. So that's the 2 questions.
Okay. Yes, I've just pulled this up, and it says, as we need action now, what do you feel are the 3 most important SDG goals? I did highlight a number just now, more than 3, but usually we always say start with 3 because it's the most doable and you can concentrate and make sure that the 3 work. And I would pick on education, not just because it's convenient, right? But because the idea is that you have to educate. And if a teacher were to walk the talk, if the teacher were to talk a lot about it, Mr. David Chong and colleagues will be talking to masses, a class, 2 classes, hundreds of people. And those hundreds of people then cascade that knowledge along. Because it's only with knowledge that we can have awareness and we can know what to do. So I would start with that. And the other thing is, for goals to work, we have to work together. We were created in such a way that, we are community beings. And so this need for inclusiveness. I talked about wars just now. And I think a lot of times all this happen is because of the lack of inclusivity and the lack of understanding of each other, which is not good. And so that whole idea of inclusivity, whether it's gender equality or that all the other goals, as I've mentioned, they're all interrelated. The need to accept each other, to understand each other more. So that would be another very important goal to me personally. And then a third important goal to me is related to what I've just said, which is partnerships. I think it's very important to have the right partners. For example, in this particular instance, for the Jeffrey Chia Foundation to partner, or the Sunway Education Group to partner with the SDSN and with all you guys, you know, and we become stronger that way because now we have so much more access to what you guys are researching on and have been working on, and we can then help you, because through our education channels, to actually broadcast that to the people who need to hear and people who need to make that change. So I would say that the third goal for me, which is very important, would be smart partnerships. And the second question, how do I balance personal life, professional work, and career? I'm not sure about important issues that lie behind your success. Success to me is always very relative. You are successful because other people think that you are doing a good job. And the thing is, so at the end of the day, it's about doing the right thing and making sure that the impact is positive and that it affects and improves the lives of the many who we come to deal with. I would have thought that that is more important measure than anything else. And how do I balance my personal life, professional life, work, and career? I don't really know. I think everything is quite jumbled up. You know, it is just one life.
Yes, I have questions myself. I think I have this one friend. I mean, it's a young friend whom are interested in contributing on making the world a better place. She's aware of the SDGs, and she really is looking forward to work towards that particular goal. And I think, like her and like many of her generations as well, is that they realize that, especially young people, that not many, how do I say this? While they wanted to act on this SDG goals, there are not that many opportunities. There are not much green jobs, if you like. And the world itself generally is somewhat yet to be very conducive for a sustainable sort of models of operations, if you like. So what would be your advice to the young people who are interested, who are passionate, but at the same time, they feel like there's not much opportunities out there, or maybe they don't know where to start really? I would suggest one of the things that you can start is just by enrolling into the master's program in Sunway. That's one way to start, I guess, and you've learned about all those things that you can do within the process.
Yes,
but
absolutely.
From yourself, what would be your advice for the young people who are interested, but they don't know where to start and what to do?
I would say, join the SDG Academy. There are loads that are being written up, and the idea is to read and be armed with the right knowledge, and you will find, and you have to not just be armed with the knowledge, but you have to internalize the knowledge and internalize the action. So knowledge is one thing, and then you have to internalize all this action, all this knowledge, and then put them into action in your own life. And it could be, you know, refusing a bottle of plastic water. Just as simple as that, and making a statement here and there. If I can walk, I will walk. And if it is, you know, within walking distance. And there are so many things that we can personally do, you know, instead of asking for plastic bags, and don't wait until you feel the pinch because the shop is charging you a lot of money for your plastic bag. Bring your own sustainable tote bags with you when you go shopping. I've got quite a number in my handbag that you know, unfolds up and things like that. Yeah. And sometimes when I see people actually sometimes, a lot of times it's men, right? Because they have nowhere to put their bags and stuff. And when I see them and I say, hey, that there's no need to buy a plastic bag. Would you like, one of my bags? And I will whip one out and I give it to them and then make friends that way. It's quite good as well. And it's a statement, because when you do that, the other person will think, hey, wow. And maybe I need to remember to bring my bag, because it's also embarrassing. The person behind me starts whipping out a bag and says, use this, and don't waste your money buying another bag. Or more importantly, don't use plastic bags that are unrecyclable and things that single-use plastic, for example. So little things like that your friend is able to do herself. You don't really need a job. It should be in all our jobs, whether we are software engineer. You would have thought that there is no opportunity. Of course there is. Simple things like saving electricity. Yeah, that's part of it. Do we need all that energy? Do we need to waste more energy?
Yeah, very true, very true. One thing that I like about that point is, even at the smallest action, big changes around the world is an accumulation of small changes done collectively. And when everybody participates and get involved, even though it's a small things, but when it's become more and more dominant, more collective, big changes would happen. And
yeah, there's a Malay saying that I love, sedikit, later jadi a bukit, So yeah. I always joke about it. I said, sedikit, become bukit can also be rubbish, So, little bit of, and the same with plastic waste, for example, and this type of thing. It will not mushroom. It will, it will become a mountain. But the same with good deeds as well. The same with sustainable action.
Yeah, just to inform the participants, sedikit lama-lama jadi bukit is a Malay proverb that literally translates that the meaning of it is that small efforts, if you put together, then you can put together a mountain of things that can be achieved. So in Prof Lee's word, it can be a bad thing as well. If it's like small things that you do that are bad, and put together, it's become a huge collections of waste that I think might not be good for the environment or for your house as well in general. I think you mentioned about Sunway universities, the programs of Zero Plastic campaign that started a couple of years ago, I think. So maybe we can explore a bit more on that and how the students actually receive this sort of campaign and in their daily life, living as a student in Sunway.
Getting rid of the plastic water bottle was one of the most difficult things we had to do. Getting rid of styrofoam, I think, was a little bit easier because you can talk about how toxic it is, and there's even people even call it, the white coffin, for example. Eat some more, you're gonna die if you keep eating from this styrofoam box, that kind of thing. Sometimes it's not really a joke, it's a threat of some kind, but all kinds of measures we will use to cajole people to get rid of such practices. But the plastic bottled water was difficult purely because people had become so attached to it somehow. The idea of bringing your own container, your own Tupperware for water and for drinks is just not fashionable anymore. If you just pick up a bottle of water, it doesn't cost much. And I actually tell them, I said, in Malaysia, it costs more than gas. So I tell them, you guys complain so much about the price of petrol, but more that petrol that we're paying for, because we have very highly subsidized petrol in Malaysia. And so, and people are actually stopped, huh? Really? Yeah. I said, yeah, why do you complain about that? Every time there's a hike, a little bit of hike in petrol prices, and everyone is at the petrol stations queuing up and causing jams until midnight, when you're happily just, buying plastic bottle of waters and drinking it and casting this bottle about. So it was difficult. So we had to tell our vendors, for example, to stop supplying, to stop selling. And we also have to, and they said, but the customers want, and they said, why are we not selling it? And it doesn't make sense. So we had to get the vendors on board with us. And then I think the next thing was having to also speak with, the rest of the Sunway group. And, you have restaurants, you have hotels, you have hospital. And there are times when the single-use plastic is seen as the safe way to go, especially during the pandemic. It became very difficult, for example, with Starbucks. I don't mean to name and shame, but in the name of, health and safety, they were refusing to take at one point our containers for our coffee. And that was quite sad. And I said, no, this has to stop. I'm not afraid of COVID. I know that you're very clean. Can you just put it into my container? And they said, no, we can't do it because it's a policy. So, we do have this to grapple with as well. So it wasn't easy, but eventually we did get rid of most of it. And of course, now if someone brings out, is seen walking around with a bottle of plastic bottled water that they have bought from somewhere and brought it in, then we will go, oh, don't do that, not good, and things like that. And of course, we have water stations everywhere. And I do personally sometimes tell the students, okay, now you've got the plastic bottle, but try to use it a few more times before you get rid of it. We've got, water stations all throughout the campus. So do use it to collect more water, drinking water for yourselves. You don't need to spend more money to purchase more drinking water.
Right, thank you. We have one more question from the audience, and this is from Helen from Nigeria. And I like these questions, I think. What is your suggestion, Prof, on the best way to work on the mindset of teachers to understand the need for ESD, education for sustainable development, especially in the low-income private sectors?
Actually, there are some people who feel that in order for us to adopt sustainable ways, it can become more expensive. For example, this whole idea of, in order for us, I think at one point to switch from styrofoam to plastic boxes or disposable ware, it costs so much money, and it will be a burden on our students, for example. So we said, actually, those are not necessarily the solutions that I'm looking for. I'm thinking more of encouraging students to bring their own containers for their food. Then they don't need that styrofoam box or that plastic box. Or if they have a plastic box, that they bring it again and reuse it. So, and we tell our vendor that you have the right to charge them for the containers that you're purchasing, should they not come with a box. But please don't use any more styrofoam or cheap plastic that is not recyclable. And so when you come to the low-income private sector that the question is about, how do you change the mindset of the teachers? it would be something along those lines, because some of the alternatives can be very expensive, but let's go back to basics. It may not cost anything at all. We all have containers at home that we can bring along. Let's go back to the wonderful banana leaf that we in Malaysia used to wrap our food up in. It's so fragrant. It tastes good and it's natural. And the banana tree is so happy to give you more and more leaves before it needs to give up its life. Because we all know that the banana tree, once it fruits, you have to take it down. What about all those leaves? And so we need to really, if we sat down and thought about, sustainable ways that we could champion and can suggest to people, then it may be less of a burden to embrace sustainability in our lives.
Yeah, one thing that I like about your point as well is, obviously when we think about SDGs, sustainable development, there are many components to it, obviously, but people often think about the technology that we need to achieve and this kind of thing. But what are the other component that we can focus on is a behavior change, and that's a lifestyle change.
Absolutely.
And on that note as well, just to promote, we have in the SDG Academy, we recently launched a new course on behavior change for SDG, and those components I think is important.
Yep, that is absolutely important, because it comes down to you and me. That's why I said, it comes down to you and me. Don't ask what other people can do. Don't ask what the government can do, what the scientists can do. Don't ask others. What about us? It starts with us.
Right. We are already at 4 o'clock, 4 p.m. in Malaysia, and I personally think that we have a very enjoyable, inspiring, and fruitful discussion. And thank you again, Prof. Lee, for spending some time with us and with the audience as well, and entertaining all the questions and sharing the initiative that you work with the team in Sunway. For us all, I'm sure a lot of them can be replicated elsewhere around the world. And not just the program itself, but the mindset, I think, is important, because in other part of the world, they have a different challenges, but the mindset is to begin with yourself, start small and try to put together and establish smart partnership with other groups. And from there on, I think it can get bigger and more meaningful as time goes on. Again, thanks to the audience as well for spending some time with your afternoon, or maybe it's evening at your place with us. Stay tuned to a more We Champion series event from Mission 1.7 Secretariat and SDG Academy. Thanks again, Prof. Lee, and I think I'll end and conclude here our sessions today. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Imran, and thank you, Shannon, for having me. Thank you.
Take care, everybody.